The National Duels Regionals are at Cornell. Time for your Big Red Zone preview for February 17th alongside my co-host Chris Harrington and Cornell assistant coach Jeremy Spates. I'm Matt Schultz from 1160 ESPN. You can hear the duels this weekend on 1160 ESPN and 1160ESPN.com. As always, presented by Advantage Sport and Fitness and the Trip Hammer Marketplace in Ithaca and D Squared Construction. This preview presented as well by Defense Soap. Defend what you have built. We'll take a look through all the weight classes as Cornell takes on Hofstra at 1 o'clock on Sunday, and the winner of the Virginia-Nebraska duel at 3 o'clock, or the loser. Cornell doesn't manage to beat Hofstra, but we're going to assume the winner of the Virginia-Nebraska duel and break this thing down for you as quickly as we can. We'll start at 125. Chris, Nahshon Garrett has really been plugging along. Steve Bonanno, a guy he beat a couple of weeks ago in the duel, 3-1. He'd also have a chance if Virginia advances to face Matt Snyder, ranked 10th in the country, a good test for Garrett. Nebraska's guy is a freshman, Eric Kofel, not ranked, but I'm sure still a good wrestler as well.
Yeah, I mean, Nahshon's the class of this weight class. He's beaten Batano twice. Last match, pretty close match, pretty exciting match, but he's a class of this weight class. Snyder's a big counter wrestler. I think that his style really does play in the advantage of Garrett. So in this weight class, I would say no matter who Cornell faces, there's a strong advantage there at 125 for Cornell.
And you would expect Garrett to get bonus points if it were Nebraska. Snyder, Bonanno, a little harder to get bonus points against. We look at 133, Bricker Dixon. Jeremy still filling into that weight class. Is he starting to get there?
He's getting bigger, yeah. He's been lifting really hard and taking a bunch of supplements and trying to get bigger. So he's finally a little above the 133-pound weight class, so that's a good thing.
That's definitely a good thing. Bricker Dixon's going to face Jamie Franco. Just faced him a couple of weeks ago. Obviously, Cornell and Hofstra just met in a duel down on Long Island 2 weeks ago. But in that duel, a good match for Bricker. Actually, one of the better matches I've seen him wrestle against Franco. Just came up short in the tiebreakers. A guy you think he could beat the second time around?
Yeah, I think hopefully this will be a good revenge match for Bricker. It was a close match, like you said, and that's a beatable kid, so hopefully we'll get a win there.
If Virginia advances, Bricker Dixon's next opponent would be George D. Camillo, ranked 13 in the country, and Sean Nagel, Jr. for Nebraska, if it is the Cornhuskers. 141, it's time for a rebound from Mike Nevinger, Jeremy. He has not looked great the last few weeks, but we're going up to NCAAs. He's a better tournament wrestler to begin with. I think this might be a chance for him to have his coming out party. He'll take on Luke Vaith again, and there's another big revenge match as Vaith just beat Nevinger 5-0 a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, we didn't start out too well at the Hofstra match a couple of weeks ago, and Nevinger actually has the reverse with the weight issue from Bricker. He's trying to shrink down a little bit. It was tough on those 1 hour weigh-ins for him, so this will be a 2 hour, a little plus weigh-in for him, so hopefully he'll get some revenge there. I think he beat Vaith last year, so they've split in the past.
Yeah, they've had a number of matches against one another, and from what my research, I believe they're 2-2 against each other in recent history. They have faced each other quite a few times. His opponents, if Virginia advances, will be 20th ranked Joe Spisak, redshirt sophomore for the Cavaliers, Ridge Kiley, a senior for Nebraska, if it is the Cornhuskers. 149, good opportunity for Chris Villalonga to have a bit of a coming out party. His Hofstra opponent, Cody Reggirello, got a pin against Ryan Dunphy a couple of weeks ago, but didn't actually face Chris Villalonga, so you'd expect Villalonga to be heavily favored against the 3-10 Reggirello. Virginia, though, has a ranked opponent there at 149, 20th ranked Derek Valeni, and Nebraska, a ranked guy as well, even higher, 10th ranked Jake Souflon, who Villalonga lost to 8-4 out in Vegas earlier this year. So a good chance for Chris Villalonga, Chris, to really maybe cement his spot in those national rankings.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Chris Villalonga is one of the most talented guys in the Cornell wrestling room. He's just got to believe that he's that talented and actually pull the trigger out there. He's one of those guys that gets a lead and then he doesn't. He closes down, and it'd be really nice to see him open up and keep going and try to build on a lead. On top of that, you look at those. I think two of those matches are very winnable. Souflon's going to be a handful for him, though. He's a very talented wrestler out of the Big Ten. That's going to be an uphill ski for Villalonga.
Yeah, Souflon, of course, if Nebraska advances, the way that Virginia and Nebraska match looks on paper, similar to the way the Cornell match would look against either opponent. I would think that Virginia is a pretty strong favorite to defeat Nebraska. Nebraska would need, I would say, at least 3 upsets to take down Virginia. So if you're planning in your head, think Virginia, and if Nebraska wins, well, we'll try to preview that a little bit too. At 157, Jesse Shannon, and Jeremy is a guy really looking for some consistency right now. 9-5, did win his last match, but looking for a little revenge. Tyler Banks is 6-3 for Hofstra. He was injured most of the beginning of the season, so that's why he hasn't wrestled as many matches. He is a very solid opponent, though. Just beat Shannon a couple of weeks ago, so it's really time for Jesse to step up and make a push as we go toward NCAAs.
Yeah, Jesse's, like you said, coming off injury and hasn't been quite himself the whole year. He lost in a close one. I think it was overtime against Banks a couple weeks ago, so looking for some revenge there.
Yeah, and if Virginia advances, his opponent will be 15th ranked Jed Moore. If Nebraska, 6th ranked James Green. So no matter who advances, Jesse Shannon's going to have a real tough opponent in his second match of the day. And every time he has one of these guys, I've been saying it all year long on the broadcast, is this the time? Is this the time he breaks through and finally gets that win that gives him that national recognition that says, hey, Jesse Shannon is a guy that maybe we should look at for these national rankings. And who knows? Maybe this is the week that he gets it done at the national duels. 165, first-ranked Kyle Dake is going to take on Nick Turdick. Pinned him in 1 minute and 5 seconds 2 weeks ago. Another one of those quickies for Kyle Dake. If Virginia wins, though, 7th-ranked Nick Sulzer comes up against Kyle Dake. Although, again, Dake pinned Sulzer in 1 minute 21 back to Southern Scholarship. So Kyle's just wrecking everybody right now. Chris, is there any reason that Kyle Dake shouldn't go out there and win bonus points for Cornell?
Well, I mean, you don't ever look at and say someone's going to get bonus points, but he's heavily favored in any match that he gets into, and he's so dynamic that he is a threat to pin anyone and put someone to their back. So big advantage in any duel that Cornell faces this week with Kyle Dake.
And given that it's the national duels, the importance of it, Cornell's going to be looking for bonus points. They
Absolutely.
need those dual points to advance, to keep winning these matches. So when the duels are on the line, you can expect Kyle Dake to man up and get those extra bonus points, especially his last 2 matches in Ithaca, New York, for we're in a Cornell Big Red Singlet. So it's going to be a big weekend for Kyle Dake. 174, Marshall Peppelman is pretty strongly in the lineup at this point, Jeremy. Is there still a question as to whether it's Marshall or Duke, or is it pretty clearly Marshall moving forward?
I think Marshall definitely has the lead in the weight class right now, and we'll just see going forward, if he can continue to produce like he has been the last couple weeks.
Yeah, Peppelman's 4-1 over the last 5 weeks. He's really turned it on lately. He'll be taking on Jermaine John of Hofstra, which was really one of the first big wins he got to spark this streak. He beat John 5-3 in overtime, but it was a good match, and Marshall Peppelman did a really good job in that match to just do enough, just get John. John's a great opponent, so we'll see in the rematch if he can get him again. And then it'll be 16th ranked John Fossey of Virginia or 4th ranked Robert Kokesh. So a real tough opponent in the second duel for Peppelman as well. Chris, do you see Marshall Peppelman being a guy that goes to NCAAs and possibly earns Cornell some points, given that he has come on late?
Well, he's kind of in that same mold as Bricker. He was looking at earlier in the year wrestling 165, so all of a sudden Kyle Dake goes up to 165 and he becomes a 74-pounder. So he's been growing into that weight class, and 4-1 since the scuffle. I think he's grown into that weight class, and with every win, especially that Joe win, lots of confidence. So I think he could be someone at the national scene that could be a big presence come March.
Well, at 184, defending national champ Steve Bozak for Cornell, ranked 4th in the country. Certainly going to be a heavy favorite in all of his matches. He'll take on either Victor Pisoni or David Heitman, who recently wrestled for Hofstra. Not really sure who the opponent will be there, but you'd expect bonus points from Mr. Bozak in that match. 184 for Virginia, Stephen Doty, unranked, 14-8 on the season, a redshirt junior for the Cavaliers, but a really good opponent for Nebraska at 184 if Josh Innen, ranked 8th in the country, can end up facing off against Steve Bozak. So really, I think, Jeremy, Steve Bozak might be the only guy on the team that kind of hopes Nebraska beats Virginia, because he'd get the better opponent, he'd get an opportunity to prove himself against a top-ranked guy, which when you've only wrestled half the season is actually a pretty big thing.
Yeah, Steve's actually ranked 4th, but he's not in the RPI just because of his lack of matches. So the more quality wins he can get, the better it's going to be for him. And so, I think that would be a good test for him.
And the RPI probably won't come into play as long as he does well at the EIWS.
Yeah, it shouldn't.
Yeah, so as long as Steve Bozak gets one of those automatic qualification spots at EIWAs, not going to be an issue that he's not in the RPI, but by then he might be in the RPI. And he's certainly a guy you expect to be at Nationals. If Steve Bozak doesn't make Nationals, something is horrendously wrong in the Cornell wrestling room. 197, Jace Bennett, another guy. Consistency is the key word. He's 23-12 now on the year. He's a guy that can pin anybody, but he can be pinned by anybody. In fact, Chris, you were telling me during the broadcast last week he leads the nation in falls against.
Yeah, he does, unfortunately, right now for any starter. But, Jace is having a turnaround. He's starting to win a little bit more. He's kind of taking control of that weight class for Cornell. And this is a big weekend to kind of just keep vaulting towards that, keep working towards the IWAs because, he did have that little lull where he was pinned twice in one weekend. So this is a big weekend for him to rebound and get some quality wins.
And you'd expect him to be a heavy favorite, very athletic, Jace Bennett. Really great in a lot of positions just because he can move so well. And for 197, it's kind of a mix. You got some of those guys that are a little heavier, that are used to the sort of heavyweight, slow moving, and you've got Jace Bennett, who's out there just going crazy and pinning guys, and his skills are great. So he's going to be a big favorite against Tim Murphy of Hofstra. Did actually pin his opponent against Hofstra, but it wasn't Murphy. It was Pisoni who had moved up to 197 to wrestle in that duel for Hofstra and pinned him in, minute 58. So Bennett looking for a big win there against Hofstra. Against Virginia, he'll take on Mike Salopek, or if Nebraska wins, Caleb Kolb, a junior for the Cornhuskers. So again, Jace Bennett should be able to win both of his matches this weekend. If he doesn't, though, maybe a little cause for concern in the room. Heavyweight, still Striker Lane's the starter, but he's Striker Lane back at Jeremy.
Striker is going to weigh in, and we're going to see over the next couple of days. He's right close to being back, so hopefully we'll have Striker. If not, Jacob's done a pretty good job, Jacob Aiken Phillips, and so he's going to weigh in as well. So that'll be kind of a game time decision there.
Striker 15-9 was injured against Harvard a few weeks ago. Jacob Aiken Phillips has been in the lineup ever since. He's 14-7 on the year. One of them will take on Zeal McGrew, the new heavyweight for Hofstra, as the old heavyweight for Hofstra. Paul Snyder was injured against Cornell 2 weeks ago when we were there, and was unfortunately injured against Jacob Aiken Phillips. So their new heavyweight in that spot, 15-6 on the year, so pretty good in his own right. We'll see how that matchup plays out. Virginia, if they win, Derek Papagiannopoulos, love that name, fantastic. 7-4 redshirt sophomore for the Cavaliers. If Nebraska wins, it'll be Spencer Johnson, sophomore from Minnesota for the Huskers. So it looks like Cornell, obviously they just beat Hofstra 30-15 and came home feeling like that was a terrible duel for the team. So Chris, you'd expect them to beat Hofstra by even more than that 30-15 margin. Not only are they home, not only is it the final matches for Dake and Bozak, but they wrestled pretty poorly against Hofstra. That should be a big win. But Virginia or Nebraska, how do you see that matchup?
Well, I think that Virginia is the decided advantage. It has a decided advantage in that. Just matchups, kind of a matchup nightmare for Nebraska. So I would say that Virginia's going to win that matchup.
And if Virginia does end up taking on Cornell, how do you see that one?
I think it's close. It's going to come down to some bonus points back and forth. Right now, we did this right before this. I had it 17-14 Virginia.
Okay, very interesting. I looked through it myself. Virginia has a lot of ranked guys. They've got ranked guys in the first 7 weight classes. They're not as strong at 84-97 in heavyweight. But the guys they do have that are ranked a little bit below the Cornell guys. Snyder ranked just below Garrett. DiCamillo obviously would have a big advantage against Dixon. Jed Moore, the 157-pounder, would have an advantage against Shannon. But Spisak is ranked lower than Nevinger. Valenti's ranked lower than Bill Longer. So you've got to give those matches to Cornell. I see it as Virginia winning 4 matches, Cornell winning 6. But again, you never know. The matches between unranked guys, you never know how those toss-ups will go. And we'll see how it plays out. Jeremy, if Cornell is unable to get through this weekend at home, could there be a silver lining in it because you get that extra little week off before EFWAs?
Last year we didn't make the finals. We actually lost at heavyweight against Illinois, and it wasn't the worst thing. We had a young team. We had traveled and competed a lot, so it wasn't a bad thing last year. We'll see how it plays out this year.
But that said, of course, Cornell wants to win the national duels. They're out there to win the national duels, and hopefully this weekend they'll get it done against Hofstra in either Virginia or Nebraska. Thanks for joining us here on the Big Red Zone Preview, brought to you by Advantage Sport and Fitness, D-Squared Construction, and Defense Soap. Defend what you have built. Once again, check out the broadcast this weekend. If you can't make it to Newman Arena, we'll be on the air 12:45 p.m. for Cornell and Hofstra on 1160 ESPN and 1160ESPN.com.